Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of NUEPIC, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on state certification programs, part of our underground storage tanks inspector training webinar series. My name is Peter Zakowski, and I'm joined by LeJeune Zemba, and we're from NUEPIC. And we'll be your hosts today. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little about NUEPIC and our work in our tanks program. NUEPIC is a regional commission that helps the states of the Northeast preserve and advance water quality. NUEPIC has been part of the work on underground storage tanks for decades. With support from the US EPA, since 1985, we have published Lustline, the publication of record for UST matters nationwide. Issue number 92 is currently available on the NUEPIC website. The next issue is expected to be published in the next month or so keep your eyes open. Since 2005, NUEPIC has co-sponsored the National Tanks Conference and Expo in partnership with EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tanks and the Association of State and Territorial Solid Waste Management Officials. Our last conference attracted more than 600 participants, and the next event will be held in September of 2025. Lastly, NUEPIC is a coordinator of information and training materials for underground storage tanks professionals. We facilitate and participate in regional and national conversations advancing UST and LUST topics and offer information to our colleagues in the industry on webinars such as this one. And with that, let's jump into the content of the webinar today. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we have with us Joe Godwin from the New Mexico Environment Department, Tom Henderson, California State Water Resources Control Board, LeJeune from the Louisiana Office of Environmental Assessment, and Jenna Denuzzo, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Today we'll have a Q&A session once all of our speakers have presented, and that'll be really focused on general discussion. It'll be your opportunity to ask questions of our panelists and open this whole thing up for discussion. If you do, as we are going through this, have clarifying questions for a specific speaker, you're welcome to ask those during their presentation. So to do that, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and any questions that will come up, I'll bring them up to our panelists when they have a chance. Okay, so to get started, I am going to hand it over to Joe.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're from. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Yeah, PowerPoint's being a little picky.
That looks good.
Everybody sees my screen? Okay. All right, this is a presentation for State of New Mexico UST Certified Installer Program. Okay. So, all right, who is required to become a certified installer in the state of New Mexico? Any contractor who wants to install, modify, repair, do that kind of work on underground storage tank systems in accordance with our rules and regulations, and they have to meet the requirements in our UST certified installer regulations in 20.5.105 NMAC. Okay. And here's a typical example of UST install in New Mexico. Okay. How to apply. Prior to sending in their application, any person who wants to become a UST certified installer first has to show that they've taken and they've passed the International Code Council or the ICC UST installer exam. And also they have to take and pass the state of New Mexico's laws and rules test. Basically, it's a test that gauges their knowledge of our state-specific rules and regulations for underground storage tanks. And they can take it at any of our field offices where we have tank inspectors, or they can come to our home office in Santa Fe and take it. And it's one that we use as a gauge to make sure that people that come in, especially out of state, have actually learned our regulations. Okay. When applying for installer certification, they must demonstrate they have 2 years out of the last 3 years of experience installing, modifying, repair, replacing underground storage tank systems. But we do allow out-of-state installs, modifications, and repairs to count towards that experience requirement. Okay, the applicant must pay a initial application fee of $50. They must not be on the delinquent payment list for child support. That's one little additional crime we have here in New Mexico. And one thing was, we have no reciprocity with other state UST installer certifications. Okay. Now, one of the things, after their application is accepted and approved, then for a UST full certified installer, they have to set up and pass what's called an on-site exam. And usually that is a full installation of a UST system. And this one, they have to set up and then notify us that they have all this set up. And they have to do it within 180 days of their application being approved. And then they have to pay a $300 application fee for the on-site exam. And we usually have one of our seasoned and experienced inspectors is the one who oversees the on-site exam. They go out, watch the installer and the applicant install the piping, the spill, the overfill, set the tanks, all that stuff. Okay. And basically the on-site exam is a way that we actually see that they actually know what they're doing as far as installing, modifying, repairing UST tank systems. Okay. And here's just an example of some Xerxes tanks going in. Okay. Okay. Part of the on-site exam is if the applicant commits 3 significant errors, then they fail the exam and will not be certified. Okay. If they fail the exam, then the tank owner has to actually hire somebody that's already certified to come in and finish up the installation and correct any errors that the applicant made. Okay. And usually the main errors that applicants commit during the on-site exam is either the failure to test equipment in accordance either with our regulations or the manufacturer's installation instructions, or they fail to provide the required notification. They don't give us the 30-day notification here in New Mexico that we require, or they don't give us the 24-hour verbal notice before each critical juncture. Okay. And just reiterated here on the on-site exam, usually it's a senior inspector who oversees the on-site exam. The PSDB inspector makes sure that they observe the installer, actually physically installing the components where, it's good to judge their knowledge of being able to install this, such as installing the piping, the spill prevention equipment, the overfill, and the secondary containment sumps. Okay. Now, we do expect that they maintain supervisory control over those parts of the installation where they need the full crew, such as setting the tanks in the tank pit, or, they maintain supervisory control over the technicians who install the release detection equipment, stuff like that. Okay. And here's one of the reasons why we require on-site exams, so we don't end up with, pipe work like this that is really bad. Okay. Okay, under our certified installer program, once they do become a certified installer, then we actually list that they have certain duties and responsibilities they have to take care of. They have to maintain supervisory control over all projects at all times. They actually have to physically be on site during all critical junctures during an install, modification, or repair. Okay. They have a duty and responsibility to report any confirmed or suspected releases to the department once they discover them. They have to provide a 30-day notification for all installations, modifications, and repairs. And like I previously stated, they also have to provide 24-hour verbal notice before all critical junctures that are listed in our regulations. Okay. And critical junctures for installs, modifications, or repairs can be completing of the excavation of the tank pit, initial integrity testing of the tank, setting the tank in the tank pit, gluing the piping together, testing the primary and secondary of the piping, testing containment sumps, testing the spill prevention equipment, testing of the release detection equipment. Okay. Now, every 4 years, certified installers in New Mexico have to renew their certification. And that's due we set in our regulations so to make it easier for us to administer it. But every 4 years, installers on March 16th, they have to make sure they get their renewal application into us by March 16th of their 4th year after they got their certification. Okay. And the application for renewal must be submitted to the Bureau no later than February 16th. Okay. But it gives us, that kind of gives us a little bit of a window, that 30-day window. So, there's always going to be people dragging or getting in a little late. So it gives us a little time. We say the absolute deadline is March 16th. And if they don't get their renewal application in by then, their certification is expired, and then they have to start over at, to meet the requirements for a brand new applicant. Okay. And also to renew, the certified installer has to pay a $50 fee along with his renewal application, and they must demonstrate during the 4-year period that they've actually done at least 2 UST installs or modifications, repairs, or replacements. Okay. And every time they go to renew, they have to retake the New Mexico laws and rules test and pass it. Okay. And we require they actually take it within the 3 months prior to applying, because we don't want everybody all of a sudden at once around March 16th saying we need to take the laws and rules test at the same time. Okay. Now, revocation of certification. Okay. And according to our rules, we can revoke certification of an installer if they are found to be incompetent, fraudulent, or derelict in a singular instance. Okay. The department does send out what's called strike letters to certified installers. If they forget to provide notification, they fail to be on site, or there's some other infraction of the rules and regulations. And we have in our regulations, if they get 3 of these in the 4-year period, then the department does have the option of starting the process of revoking their certification. Okay. We'll go back one. And one thing I should have put on here, if we do revoke their certification, it's only for 2 years. After 2 years, they can reapply. Okay. Okay, and we do maintain a list of certified installers on our website and the companies they work for, and we regularly update the list. Okay. Now, we do have another class of installer here in New Mexico that we call junior installer. Okay. It was a new category that was created back in 2018 that allowed contractors who only install spill and overfill prevention equipment on USTs to get certified and do that work. And it was to address a shortage of what we call our full installers, the previous class I talked about. Okay. Now, the application process for the junior installer is the same as for a full certified installer, with the exception that instead of 2 out of the last 3 years, they only have to certify 1 out of the last 3 years with the experience of the installation of spill and overfill prevention equipment. Currently there's no on-site exam required to become certified as a junior installer. Okay. And the renewal process is the same with a full installer. You have to send in a renewal application every 4 years, no later than March 16th. Okay. And similar to a full installer, the junior installer has to demonstrate when they go up for renewal that they've done at least 2 installations, replacements, or repairs of spill and overfill prevention in their previous 4-year certification period. Okay. And also the same as for our full certified installer, if a junior installer is found to be incompetent, derelict in his duties, or negligent, then we can start the process and revoke their certification. Okay. All right, now we are drafting regulations currently for certified testers, but right now for testers, what we do have is that they actually have to demonstrate when they do testing that they're actually qualified to do that testing. I'll run through that right quick. Okay. Now, in New Mexico, anyone who conducts periodic testing of UST systems must demonstrate they're qualified to do so. And the testing where they have to do this is any line tightness and leak detector testing, any tank tightness testing, spill testing, containment slump integrity testing, release detection functionality, and cathodic protection. Okay. Now, to qualify for spill prevention equipment testing and containment slump testing, they just have to show that they've taken and passed the PEI RP 1200 test. That's the recommended practice for testing of, a lot of the equipment on UST systems. Okay. For tank and pipe tightness testing, they must be performed by an individual who's trained and certified. This testing method is third-party certified on the NUI Glide website. Okay. Functionality testing of leak detectors and leak detection equipment must be conducted by an individual who is trained and certified by the equipment manufacturer and or the testing equipment manufacturer. They're doing like an Accurite test or Petrotight test on line tightness testing. They have to show that they maintain their certification with the company that produces that testing equipment. And anybody who's doing cathodic protection testing must demonstrate that they're qualified by either providing us that they've or a certified CP tester through the Steel Tank Institute, or through NACE, or as it's now called, the Association of Material Protection and Performance, or AMP. Okay. And when they do that testing, then they're required to actually, in our rules and regulations, either that person or the owner operator, they must submit that report to the department within 60 days of completion of the testing, or if it's a failure, it has to be submitted to the department within 24 hours. Once they find out the results of failure. Okay. And like I said previously, that we're in the process of drafting new regulations to incorporate the certification of certified testers, or the certification of testers. Okay. And that's my slideshow for today. Was a little quicker.
Thank you, Joe. That was fantastic. We have one person that raised their hand, so I'd like to have that person. I'm going to allow you to talk. And Scott, if you can go ahead and ask your question for Joe. And so you should be able to unmute, Scott. Okay, well,
there we go. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
I accidentally clicked the button. I apologize. Do not have
okay. All right, thank you. In that case, we'll go ahead and lower your hand, and then we will move on to Tom.
All right. I think I've got this under control now. As Peter mentioned, I'm Tom Henderson from the state of California. I'm the manager of the UST Leak Prevention Unit and Office of Tank Tester Licensing. I'm not going to dive into the same depth that Joe just did. We are going to talk about our testing and service technician. I'm going to go back there a little bit. Sorry, I'm out of control on the buttons here. And we'll talk about how we got there and what makes California a little bit different and why this may or may not fit your particular type of program. We'll talk about California today, the different certifications, because we have a bundle of them, not just for testing and Office of Tank Tester Licensing, but we have them for just about everything now these days. And I'll talk a little bit about the enforcement and testing of these different entities as we get towards the end. All right. California is different. I know you all were thinking it, so I figured I'd just clear the air right off the bat. We've been different on our UST programs, and things really changed about 20 some odd years ago. But we've always had strong environmental policy. It didn't really matter which party was in charge here in California. Most of the things I'm talking about were done under Republican governors. We've had this UST code and regulations. We started implementing this early, 85, 86. Right around the same time the US EPA was doing their own. We're not a SPA state, so we've always had our own set of regulations, and we've always been a little more stringent than the US EPA regulations. We do have an approval requirement for any type of precision test method in the state of California. I know most of you guys use a national work group. We use them sort of, but we modify it, make it very California-esque at the end. And one of the major differences in California, obviously, is our extensive groundwater usage. Maybe you haven't heard, it's been a little dry out here, not this last year. Thank you, El Nino. It was actually pretty nice, but generally we're very, very dry. Surface water is pretty much all called. Everyone's claimed that. We do have extensive groundwater usage, and these underground storage tanks can be very problematic, obviously, for, as you can imagine, for groundwater usage. I want to talk a little bit about California, and I'm patting California on the back a lot of this here, but again, this fits our system very, very well on how we do things. Currently, we have slightly over 37,000 UST systems in the state. In 2022, we had one new release, and wrap your head around that number for just a second. I think the 3 years prior to that, we had 4 total releases. We pretty much have stopped new releases in the state of California. And I guess your question is, well, how'd you do that, California? That's amazing. No, 3 things. We did 3 different things, and it all happened roughly at the same time. We did the UST construction and monitoring standards. We changed all those. We made compliance inspection an annual inspection instead of once every 3 years. And ultimately, the final part of this 3-legged stool is that we have strict testing and service requirements here in the state of California. Why do we have all these things here? MTBE changed everything here in the state of California. So back in the late 90s, obviously, you know, we'd already switched out lead. It was making the boomers crazy. And so we went to MTBE. As my granddaddy says, we went out of the fryer and into the fire or something along. I wasn't listening to granddaddy enough, apparently, but it changed everything. This is what you see. It's just a transition sump or a pass-through sump that we have here. But this is the standard that we had in California for the last 20 years. Everything is secondarily contained. That's a secondarily contained sump. The piping is all secondarily contained. And the monitoring that we do here in California is very, very different. We use vacuum or hydrostatic for everything. All pipes are monitored 24/7, both the primary and secondary containment, all sumps, the tanks are all. So these systems don't have to do secondary containment testing, what we have for our pre-2003 systems. And the reason is that they are secondarily contained and monitoring the secondary containment 24/7. So this is the standard. This is everything that we build in California these days. And it really, like I said, changed everything. One of the other problems that we found at roughly the same time with this MTBE scare, for those of you who don't know, MTBE is a fuel additive that once it gets out, it's hydrophilic, it likes to run. So we had very small plumes turning into very large plumes, and it freaked everybody out. This was the late 90s, and most of these changes that we implemented happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we got 2 different types of certifications. One we've had all along. Back in 1984, we had tons of single wall tanks. Actually, the vast majority in 1984 were single wall tanks. We made this Office of Tank Tester licensing in 1987. This was really a product of these single wall systems. We didn't want them to be cracked or anything to happen with these underground storage tanks. So we came up with this method, and I'll talk about that one a little bit further here. But in the MTBE scare that I talk about, we really required everybody to have some kind of certification. So in 2005, we required that designated operators, which you guys call A and B now. We've had it obviously for 20 years at this point here. Designated operators needed to have an ICC certification. The 3 on top that I'm pointing out here, the California ones, those are unique to California. We make up the test, and it's required. You can't touch our systems without some sort of ICC exam or the Office of Tank Testing Licensing certification. We made our UST inspectors. We've also get certified, and finally we made the UST service technicians get certified here. And the UST installer retrofitter, that's a national test here. We've implemented it here in California. We think it's a good idea. One of the problems that we found in 2019 90s and early 2000s is that none of these people were doing a great job. We didn't have the UST operator certification, and we implemented that because of the MTBE here. The UST inspectors, we didn't have any type of way of verifying that they were getting enough education as they passed through. And there was nothing for the service technician at all at that particular time. And we found that, new systems that were being built were leaking. And so the UST installer retrofitter was one of those things that we also decided to include. We really upped the game for everybody that was going to do UST work here in the state of California. Let's talk about the tank tester licensing. So this is that original one that I was mentioning that goes back to 1987. And this was to make sure that we weren't damaging existing systems out there, what we call the single wall systems. For those of you who don't know, at this point in 1987, probably 95% of the USTs were single wall. Currently, it's about 5%. So we have flipped that, which is great. All single wall systems need to be permanently closed by December 25th of 2025. So we've got about 2 more years of single wall systems, and then they're gone. As we like to call them, they're the dregs of our system, of our program at least. And Office of Tank Tester Licensing may not have the same value after 2025 as it has currently. There we go. This license is specifically for precision test, and currently, previously the precision test was a 0.1 gallon per hour, and currently it's a 0.005 gallon per hour. This is one of those things again that we changed in because of the MTBE issue, is that we really upped by several orders of magnitude our precision test. Anytime you install a new system, it has to be done with what we call enhanced leak detection, that 0.005 gallon per hour exam. Both of those types of tests are controlled by people with tank tester licensing. These are the requirements that we have here in California. So for you to become an OTTL, you have to have observed 50 tank tests with a licensed tank tester. That's a really high bar. It may not seem like a lot, but we just don't do a lot of precision testing these days, and mostly because everything's double walled and vacuum monitored and pretty high speed. And the 0.005 isn't really a pressure test anymore, like it had. It's just a different version, and we're not really concerned about that necessarily damaging the tank. So you have to observe 50 tank tests. You have to pass a state examination. That's going to cost you $600. I don't think that's ever really changed. I think that may be the same number from 1987. You have to be certified by the manufacturer of the test equipment, and you have to recertify that every 2 years. And then you have to recertify your tank tester every 3 years. Now, that doesn't require you come in and take that test again, but it does require that you pay us another $600. The idea is that this program is supposed to be self-paid for. These fees are supposed to pay. It doesn't any longer. We just don't have enough of these OTTL licensed people any longer. I think we're down to about 50 of them. So this is kind of a diminishing group that we have, but it is what we have right now. And so, as I mentioned, all these ones that we talked about earlier, these were all established in regulation. They became effective in 2005. And particularly, we're going to talk about that first line item, the service technicians. They're super important here in the state of California because they do a little bit of everything. So let's talk about that. So to be a service technician here in California, you have to have a contractor's license. That's that very first step, or be working for somebody with a contractor's license. You have to have passed that ICC certification, that very specific California test. And anytime you're on a facility doing any type of service technician work, which includes testing and whatever kind of monitoring that we do on these systems here, somebody has to have that ICC certification. Everybody in the facility has to be trained on whatever they're touching, but only one person needs to have that ICC UST service technician certification. Additionally, you have to have manufacturer's training on whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're doing a secondary containment test or accelerated secondary containment test, you need to be tested by that manufacturer or certified by that manufacturer. If you're going to be working on the monitoring panel, you have to obviously be certified by that monitoring panel manufacturer at whatever level that you're going to be working on that. They have obviously multiple. If you're going to be programming, you have to have the programming certification. And this may be the future of what we have for tightness testing even. Now, that's just wild speculation on my part, but as we move to everything being secondarily contained and monitored 24/7, it may not make sense for us to have the OTTL in the future. But we'll see how that goes. We're working on it. These have different enforcements, I really like the top one, the Office of Tank Tester Licensing, because it's the state of California's license itself. Those enforcements are typically done by us here at the state, either us or our sister unit at the Office of Enforcement. Tank testers are subject to all sorts of different type of penalties. So, but civil. And we can do this for anyone for tampering, but I like to show this all the time. 1 year in jail and $10,000 for tampering. So I don't know that we've actually put anyone in jail, but we're trying. Well, someday maybe we'll get that. That seems a little harsh, but we'll see how it goes. Service technicians, on the other hand, are different. The certification requirement doesn't belong to us. It belongs to ICC. And the penalties that we have for the service technicians, whether they're late in turning in the documentation or whatever, they've done all sorts of incorrect things. Those penalties go to the UST owner and operator. The way that our regulations are written, just about everything goes to the UST owner and operator. Some people find that very unfair. We find that service technicians that continue to get their owners and operators penalized stop being service technicians pretty quickly. They all talk amongst themselves. Those penalties to the UST owners and operators are beefy. They are $500 to $5,000 per day, per tank, per violation. So as you can imagine, if you missed in monitoring certification and didn't return, that's a lot. And there's 3 tanks, that's a lot of penalties, and it's per day. So that can really stack up pretty quickly. And the enforcement on this is not usually performed by the state. It can be, like I said, we do have a sister unit, the Office of Enforcement, that does a lot of this type of enforcement. But usually it's done by the local agency. California is very decentralized. We have the state people like myself. Some of our peers call us the ivory tower. We don't really go out in the field that frequently. We're here writing regulations and doing presentations for y'all, but we don't really go out and do a lot of inspections. So we have 90 or so what we call unified programs that go out and implement these laws and regulations that we have built up. And they're the ones that will write up these service technicians to the owners and operators and penalize those. And obviously we have, other things we have red tags and all these district attorneys and AEOs and a variety of different ways that they can implement these penalties here. So that's what I've got for you. There's a very high view of what our program is. It doesn't fit everybody. It certainly fits us very well here in the state of California. And if you got any questions specific to the state of California, please let me know. If not, we will wait to the end. And again, I'm Tom Henderson from the State Water Resources Control Board.
Thank you, Tom. Excellent presentation. And I don't see any questions that have come in specifically for you at this time. I will note that we did get a question in the Q&A earlier about availability of materials, and I just wanted to let everyone know that yes, we will be sending copies of materials out to all registrants after the webinar today. So with that, I will turn it over next to Holly.
Hey guys, my name's Holly. I'm from the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, and I am going to be presenting to you our program. So first thing I'm going to get started. Our program got started on January 20th, 1992. Our program mainly focuses on preventing or detecting releases to the environment by regulating critical junctures. You can see here, there's a picture of us.
Sorry, Holly.
Uh-huh. Am I sharing the wrong screen?
You're not sharing your screen yet.
Okay, let me go back. Okay. All right, can you see me now?
Yes, and we see you in sort of regular PowerPoint view.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Let me get started again. So our program got started in January 20th, 1992. Our program primarily focuses on preventing or detecting releases to the environment by regulating critical junctures. You can see here, you got a sump full of product, and I think we can agree that no person in industry wants to open a sump lid and see this. Our department has two different types of certifications. We do install and repairs as one and closures. As of this morning, we currently have 166 licensed certified workers in our state. And of that number, we have 17 that are licensed only for install repairs, 48 that are licensed only for closures. And if I did my math correctly, 101 are licensed for both closure and install repairs. That being said, we do not require licensure for routine testing. We just regulate certified workers in critical juncture type aspect. So in order to get certified, there's a few steps you got to go through. Obviously, you'll need an application for the required fees. At the present time, the required fee is $146. For those applicants that are interested in obtaining both licensures, they are required to pay this fee for each requested exam. So on the application, they also must demonstrate that they have a minimum of 2 years of experience and have actively participated in a minimum of 5 separate jobs associated with the type of licensure that they're seeking. For an install repair licensure, at least 3 of those 5 separate jobs must be installs rather than repairs. So in other words, an applicant wouldn't be able to assist in just 5 repairs and then apply for a licensure for install repairs. We do look for people that are applicants with an engineer degree in the specialties of civil, mechanical, or environmental with closely related work experience can substitute out that experience requirement. And then once all of this has been reviewed and found to be acceptable, an exam will be scheduled and the applicant will receive notification via written correspondence of the time and the date of the exam. DEQ currently administers a state exam. We have a list of study guides, which include industry standards, recommended practices, EPA publications, DEQ UST regulations, and that's all posted on our public website. And it's up to the applicant to obtain or purchase the study materials. We do not provide that. Louisiana regulations also requires a passing grade of 75 on the exam to be licensed. If a passing result is not received, the applicant can retake the exam up to 3 times within a 12-month period, and retaking the exam would require a new application and new fees. So how do you stay certified? Once you get certified, your license is valid until December 31st of the second year. And by November 1st of the expiring year, the licensed worker should submit an application for renewal. The application must be accompanied by the applicable fees. The application must, there's a separate fee for each license required of $146 again. The applicant must also submit the required continuing education hours, or they may request to take the exam in lieu of the continuing education hours. As you can imagine, that's not a very popular selection in our state. We do provide a list of approved continuing education hours on our public website, and we do have an application for courses that are interested in being reviewed to be added to the list. Once you submit that application that's found on our public website, you're required to submit supporting documentation, such as your outline on your course, the method for documenting attendance, credentials of the instructors, as well as the time and the location the course is being offered, and that'll all be reviewed. And written correspondence will be provided if it is deemed acceptable. So how do inspectors determine certification? So once certified workers met all the requirements and they've passed the exam, they're provided with an ID card and a certificate via mail. The card looks similar to what you see on this screen. It should be provided to the inspector upon request. We also have a list on our public website that is accessible to anyone looking to hire a certified worker for certified type equipment. And we also post the card and the certificate on electronic data management system, or EDMS for short, under the AI or agency interest number associated with the certified worker. So first license we're going to go over is installs. As you can see here, the definition or the steps taken during installation of UST system that are crucial to the prevention or detection of releases for the system. That would be our main focus. The following that we're going to look at are all the things that require a certified worker for to be on site and supervising. That's going to be the preparation of the excavation, placement of anchoring devices, setting of the tank and the piping, strapping if it's necessary, completion of the backfill and filling of the excavation, installation of external release detection devices associated with groundwater vapor monitoring within the excavation zone. Anytime during the installation that piping components are connected, that would include, but not limited to, product risers, piping, vent piping, shear valves in a pressure system or bottom of a check valve in a suction system, installation of containment sumps during the installation or renovation, installation of spill and overfill prevention equipment during an installation, pressure testing during an installation, including the system, piping, tank. The next thing we're going to go over is going to be your repairs. Again, our main focus is the prevention of releases. You can see that this definition is very similar to the installs. I just want to note that the repair and the install is a combined licensure, so you would get that all in one. So the things that are going to be requiring a certified worker is going to be the excavation of the existing tanks and our piping, the actual performance of the repair, when the equipment is connected to the tank or the piping, the tank or the associated piping are tested, the removal of the excavation and backfill paving, cutting of the access in the tank, inspection and precision testing of the completed lining if a lining is installed, and the reinstallation of the access opening. The next thing we're going to go over is going to be closures. Closure critical juncture. Again, we're looking at the prevention or detection of releases. This is going to include the process of cleaning of the tank, vapor removal, purging the tank. Any subsurface sampling to determine if a release has occurred unless a response action contractor is present. A response action contractor, or RACs for short, are those individuals that have been reviewed and approved to conduct work under the Louisiana Motor Fuel Trust Fund and within the state of Louisiana. The removal of the tank, which includes filling with an inert substance and or complete removal. So the next thing we're going to go over quickly is things that do not require a certified worker. These are things that people can do without having supervisory of the licensed workers. This would be install, repair, closure of excluded or partially excluded UST systems if the partially excluded components are what's being worked on. Install, repair, closure of any above ground component of a UST system. Non-UST improvements, that's going to be structures, fixtures, appenditures, parking lots, flower beds, anything like that. Also the install, repair, closure, maintenance of cathodic protection systems. We don't require a certified worker for that type of activity. However, if it's a new cathodic system added to a system that previously didn't have one, then we would look to a corrosion expert for that design. You also do not need a certified worker if you're dry fitting, piping, and preparation before the install. Spills and overfills, containment sumps. If you're installing those and you're repairing or replacing, sorry, not install, repair or replacing, and the riser is not disconnected from the tank, you would not need a certified worker. If the device is directly connected to the tank, then a certified worker would be required, and they would be necessary to be supervised. No certified worker is required in the assessment of the internal of the tank before the lining is installed or the application of the lining. No certified worker for transportation disposal after a closure, a tank's been removed from the ground. assessment of remediation or corrosion action, any kind of activities associated with that, unless a repair or modification of the UST system is being conducted. Again, in our state, we have those RACs or response action contractors that we lean to for that. So you would not be required to be a certified worker for this kind of activity, as well as the construction of monitoring wells or borings during the assessment or remedial activities. So the responsibility of certified workers in Louisiana have very little regulatory requirements. The regs are written to our owner operators responsible for everything, but the certified workers do share responsibility for the 7-day notification prior to any critical junctures. And this is not just at the beginning of an install. A lot of times we see where tanks are installed and weeks or months later, they return to do the piping. In those types of situations, multiple 7-day notifications should be provided for every critical juncture. We don't require notification from both the owner operator and the certified worker. One or the other is fine, but the lack of notification would be a violation on both. The same situation occurs for incidents. Reporting of incidents is a shared requirement between the owner operator and the certified worker. And again, we only would like one notification. We don't need one from both, as long as the timeframes are met in either notification is sufficient. We also allow the use of a subcontractor who is not a certified worker, as long as there's a certified worker present during the critical junctures to supervise or control. Now, this does not mean that you have a certified worker on site, sitting in their vehicle, taking a nap while the work's being conducted. They should be responsible for the actual supervision of the critical junctures that are occurring. So once you're licensed, your license can be revoked. LDEQ has only had to use this on one occasion when a certified worker was failing to notify single point of contact or SPOC of incidents involving exceedances from sample events during closure activities. He also neglected to provide that information to owners. And after multiple events of this occurring, he was eventually revoked. Revocation is done by using a board made of 7 individuals that are from the organizations and regulated community and 1 member of LDEQ. This would be the administrative authority or the designee of the administrative authority. The board's used on an ad hoc basis and is also used for program modifications if necessary. The board is considered counsel, and their advisories or their activities are only advisory, and the department does hold the final determination of administration of the authority of the regulations. If your license is revoked, you can choose to appeal under the Louisiana revised statutes. Some of the issues that can cause revocation would be withholding required documentation, fraud or deceit when submitting documentation, willful violation of the law and or the regulations. So even though we have a program in our state, there's still some things that just happen out of your control. In this instance, we had an install that was occurring and we had a massive rain event and the tank exploded. In this case, the manufacturer came out, recertified the tank, and they were able to reinstall the tank. Here was a closure. We were closing 1 tank and there were active tanks also occurring on the site. During the attempt to close the tank, they punctured an active line. So then that line repair had to be done under the direction of a certified worker. And that was a sampling event occurred to make sure that all the contaminated soils were removed. This one is did not require a certified worker. They were doing some parking lot repairs. The tanks were empty because they had been in temporary closure, and they uncovered the tanks. We had a heavy rain event and the tanks floated. These were single wall tanks, and this was after the requirement to have double wall components. So these tanks were no longer allowed to be reinstalled. So the lesson here would be, even though you don't require a certified worker, you may want to consult with someone before you do any kind of repairs that's going to be in the vicinity of the tank. And that pretty much covers our program. Again, I'm Holly with Department of Environmental Quality.
Perfect. Thank you, Holly. What a great presentation. Really appreciate all those details, and it's helpful, I think, to see those, those places where you still can have errors and issues despite having a robust program in place. All right, let's see. Okay, there's one question in the Q&A, but Holly is typing her answer to that. So with that, we will move on to Jenna.
Okay, can you see?
Can't see your screen, but we can hear you.
Okay, let's see what I did wrong.
Perfect.
Better? Cool.
Yes.
All right. My name's Jenna Denuzzo with New Jersey DEP, and our staff, we do both inspections of all of the regulated tanks, which include federally regulated as well as state regulated heating oil tanks. Our group also oversees the UST contractor licensing program, inspections, and enforcement. So we have many different types of licenses for contractors. They are based on category of work and then basically the experience of the worker as far as what tiered license they get. So as you can see, we have installation. We have an installation license. There are 3 different subcategories to that. So we have installation and tire. Basically, that individual can install till their heart is content as far as the regulated tanks. Now, in order to work on, install, close anything tanks in our state, that includes everything from and including the shear valve up through the vent line. So anything in between, if someone touches it in any way, tests it, repairs it, replaces it, you have to be licensed. Install and tire can repair or replace anything on that tank system. Installation RDM is basically like a step down. So they can repair and replace anything that has to do with monitoring systems, leak detectors. No drop fills, no hardwired equipment, no spill buckets, anything like that. You're looking at monitoring systems, sensors, ATGs, high-level alarms, LLDs, and that's where the line's drawn. The next one down, which is basically at this point the entry level installation license, is the service technician license. This is a new license. It's still in pilot program. But this license came to be when our group took over the contractors about 3 years ago. The contracting world actually came to us and said, hey, we're having a hard time getting experienced entire guys. So we're looking to get basically, is there an option for a repair license? And between us, the contractors, we were able to come up with a service technician license, meaning these guys can repair or replace like for like failing equipment where concrete isn't broken. We're basically allowing people to, if they fail a sensor, if they fail an LLD, if they fail a drop tube, they can quick replace it. Previously, if a tester failed just a sump sensor, but they did not have an install and tire license, they could not replace that. They had to leave. The company needed to send somebody new to replace it. Things just weren't getting fixed as quickly as we would have liked ultimately. Closure is another big license. It's pretty self-explanatory. They remove tanks, pipes. Closure in our state is considered from the time the ground is broken until the time the ground is to grade. All right, same for installation and tire. If someone is installing a tank in New Jersey, from the time they dig that first bucket of dirt until the time they are to grade, license is required to be on site when work is happening. Then we go to our testing licenses. We have CP, so you can have the testers, they only test stuff. We have a specialist, which is the next grade up. They can install and repair and test any CP system. Tank testing, these are our general testers. Everybody who runs tests in New Jersey, it doesn't matter what kind it is, needs to have at least this license. If an individual only holds the tank testing license, they cannot fix anything they fail, which is where that service technician license comes in. This allows, again, the tank testers, if they fail something smaller that's a quick swap out, they can swap it out, retest it, and the site's back in compliance before the company leaves. Our group also oversees subsurface evaluation license, which is primarily at this point used for the unregulated heating oil tank program, but we do actually issue those licenses. In order to get an initial individual certification. The requirements are pretty much the same from category to category. So OSHA, proof of manufacturer, if you want an install testing or CP license. Our experience falls into two different categories. Primarily, the first one, 2 years with participations in five projects per year. Nothing older than 3, that falls into your installations and your closures, right? Those jobs take a longer amount of time. So 5 installs, 5 closures for each of the last 2 years. That's a decent amount of work. And then there's 9 months with participation in 25 projects. This is where the testers fall in. Most of these guys, they're testing 25 sites in 9 months. So we can get them their license faster under this experience portion. And then we do have an education requirement, but it is only for the SSE license since they're taking samples and reading data and coming up with remediation plans. Individual certification, the process in general, once people believe that they met the requirements that I just described, they provide all of that information on an application. And then we give them the okay to go take the exam. For steel tank or new NACE, we take the manufacturer's certs. They give a test, they do a good job. We do not make another exam happen. Everything else is done through ICC, so we don't actually, nobody has to wait for us to go take a test. They sign up, they go whenever they're ready. They just provide us with the passing results at the end. We do have renewals. It's every 3 years. We're basically just looking to make sure that everybody stayed up on their certifications. So OSHA recertification classes for both manufacturer, and then we run DEP approved classes for that basically just does an overview of what they're expected to do with their license, what they're allowed to do with their license, our general rules, and then an area of, commonly seen issues in the field, how to stay out of trouble, what to do if you find certain things, where contractors are in the world of what we expect of them and how to handle certain situations. We are very strict with if your license expires, you cannot do work. It's not I'm working with an expired license, it's you are working unlicensed. So what we have is people have their 3-year license. The day after they expire, they can no longer be a licensed individual on site until they have a new license in hand. We do allow them to renew up to 90 days after the expiration. However, if they go over the 90 days, they have to reapply as an initial. For a lot of people, that doesn't sound so bad. They did it once, not a big deal. In real life, a lot of our older guys, they're no longer installing full-blown gas stations. So if they go over the 90-day mark, they actually won't qualify to get their license back since they won't have the experience in the last 2 years of building gas stations from the ground up. So once you have an individual licensed, right, they have a license in hand, then we require the firm to be certified. What we're looking for firm certification is literally application and fee. It's state government. You're getting that anywhere. We're looking for proof that the firm has at least one individual who is licensed to actually do the work. We will not issue a firm certification to any business that does not have someone on staff who can legally perform those services in New Jersey. And then we're looking for proof of insurance. Should the company cause a discharge at the site, it's on them. Contractor reviews happen a couple different ways. There are office reviews where we're looking at new applications. We are looking over expired licenses and putting individuals and firms on notice. Hey, you expired, you can't do work anymore. We send out notice of violations for firms who have individuals who are expired and they're still performing work. We also let companies know. We go through, we let the individuals know that they expired. We will let the company they work for know that they expired and they can't be doing work. Ultimately, if a firm's licensed individual expired and they don't get their license handled quickly and there's nobody else licensed, we will pull that firm's license immediately because they have no one who is allowed to perform licensed services. Our field staff also does unannounced site inspections of our contractors. We have a couple different ways of doing this. One is, normal. You're just driving by and you see a truck and you see the tank field's wide open and you run in and you say hi. We also have a 14-day notification process where the owner operator is responsible to send it in. However, we also hold contractors to making sure this is sent in. It's a 14-day notice. It tells us what contractor was hired to work where. We have a full calendar that goes out to all of our staff members' cell phones. So if they're in an area, they look up and see if anybody's working near them to make a point to go say hi to these contractors. So we show up on site to do an inspection. Obviously, we introduce ourselves. We will ask for the individual's wallet card. So they have a wallet card with their identifying number from the department, their name, their expiration date, and all of the categories of service they're allowed to be doing. So we meet the licensed guy, we take a look at his wallet card, we make sure his driver's license matches, just to make sure we're talking to the right person. And then we'll just kind of verify that the work they're doing is included in one of the categories of the license we were handed. If there is no certified person on site or they're working within a category that is not part of that individual's certification, at that point, we basically tell them to call the owner of the company if that person is not the owner of the company. At that time, the owner has a choice to either send someone who is licensed so they can continue work, or they need to pack up and go home. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're still issuing a notice of violation for having no licensed individual on site while activities are happening. And then we do our own contractor enforcement. I know a lot of states have inspectors and then enforcement division. Our group is year one. You start to finish, it's yours. So if you write a notice of violation to a contractor, we do issue administrative orders and penalties. This is our list of our penalty assessments as far as how they go up for each violation, if it's the same violation to the same firm. We do issue penalties both to the individual and the firm. And then revocation is the same. If we have somebody who is continually violating the contractor rules, we will do a revocation of that individual tester if the rest of the firm seems to be doing okay. Or we will also do the firm depending on the situation. That's about it.
All right. Excellent. Well said, Jenna. Really appreciate that presentation and how much detail you went into. We have now heard from all of our presenters, and I am going to transition here into our Q&A shortly. Jenna, there is one question that came in specifically related to New Jersey into the Q&A, so I'm just going to direct your attention to that if you want to take a stab at that by typing an answer. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is invite folks to please provide questions in the Q&A. Please, when you do so, address your question to a specific speaker or multiple speakers, but help us facilitate and get the answer to the right person. And before we move into questions that are coming in, I am going to ask a question to each of our presenters, knowing that you all are the experts on your state's programs. You work in those every single day. You talk, you've learned from each other through this process. I know you've known each other in the past. You're learning from the other programs that are out there. So my question to each of our presenters is essentially, looking at your own program, are there any big things that if you could make changes, you would to how you approach your certification programs? So I'll open that up and let any of the four of you jump in, unmute, and provide an answer. See who has the courage to step up first.
Yeah, I'll jump in real fast on this. So the two that I showed as far as our program, as far as the testing, is the Office of Tank Tester Licensing and then the ICC service. I think that we can incorporate everything into the ICC. Office of Tank Tester Licensing is in code, so it makes it very difficult for us to do any modifications to that. But I think that that is a part of our program that may have run its course. So that's what I would probably adjust right off the bat if I had a magical wand.
Thanks, Tom.
This is Holly. I also agree with Tom in the fact that we do a state test. I think that it would be good to have maybe a standardized test. And I also would like to see a more defined revocation process in our state, similar to other states. I mean, just there seems to be more defined as far as like number of infractions, penalties, that kind of thing. So if I could choose and change anything, that's what I would be looking at.
Thanks, Holly. That's good perspective. I can see that Jenna is actively typing an answer in our Q&A. So, Joe, any input?
Well, in New Mexico, by statute, right now we're limited from actually regulating or requiring certification for closures. That is one thing we would like to do, but it would take a legislative change to do that. So we're trying to do everything we can, but that may be one of the ones that takes some time.
Yeah, understood. That's good perspective, and always a challenge is, you all are required to do what you are required to do by statute, and then how you move forward and make adjustments to your program within your control. That's those are challenges, I think, for any regulator. And Jenna, any thoughts on if you were to make adjustments, what adjustments you might make?
As far as the actual contractor certification portion, our main goal right now is to get that service tech license actually written into the rule. Since right now it is a pilot program. Other than that, it's more on the inspection side, doing actual installation inspections of the work, not just spot inspecting, that the contractors on site are licensed, is really the bigger goal in the contractor world for us right now.
Okay. Great, good perspective. So I don't actually see additional questions coming in, but
there is a hand up. I don't know.
Oh, there's a hand up, please. Yeah, Lillian.
Yeah, Julie Berry has her hand up. I just allowed you to talk, and you should be able to unmute, Julie, if you'd like to ask your question.
I accidentally hit that, so sorry about that.
It seems like that's the trend with that button. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Oops.
Nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we've got one general question that I think is good for each of you that's come into the Q&A. So that is, are all the install programs solely funded by fees, or is there a mix of fees and general funds? So considering kind of how, you all discussed different certification fees and renewal fees, any thoughts on additional detail on how those programs are funded?
Well, I can speak for the state of New Mexico. We actually, our certification fund, we do have the $50 application, the $300 on-site exam fee, all those different fees, but they don't pay for the program. Our program is not part of the general fund in the state. We actually have what's called a corrective action fund that's actually funded by the state's petroleum storage tank loading fee. We get it's right around $100 per drop at a facility. And so that's the real big one that funds most of everything we do at the Bureau.
Thanks, Joe. That's helpful.
We're primarily general. I mean, $375 every 3 years isn't enough to fund anything.
Thanks, Jenna. It's good
Mhm.
perspective. Tom or Holly?
I'm not 100% sure on how our state operates on funding for this type of program and what they use. If I had to guess, I'd say we're probably using some of the general funds, because I don't see where the fees that we require are enough to run the whole program. But I'd have to check on that and get back.
Yeah, and we're a little different. I mean, we do, the vast majority of our program is funded by fees from the UST owner and operators, usually associated with the permits. But we do have a certain amount of it that's funded by the US EPA. Thank you, US EPA, if you're out there right now. And that's probably about 20% that we get from US EPA every year.
Okay. Tom, thanks everybody. It's amazing to me, being in a position that thinks about funding with some regularity, how many different ways we all figure out how to get the work done. And money is crucial for that in every case. So Joe, we have a question in the Q&A for you, and it is, does your rules test involve real world situation, or is it more legalese?
Well, basically, it's based on our regulations. Basically, we just have simple questions about, laws and rules test. When are they supposed to provide notification? What levels the overfill prevention supposed to be set at? All the different, performance standards that a tank system is supposed to meet, and they're supposed to know when they're, installing a tank system.
Okay, thanks. I mean, that seems to make a lot of good sense, and I appreciate that answer. So Lillian, do you see any hands up? Oh, we've got a question that has come in. So we have one for you, Tom, for California. How does California receive EPA funding without SPA? Perhaps something other than LUST and LUST prevention grants?
No, we do actually get the LUST and UST prevention grants as well too. It's part of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. We still have to. There's a number of flaming hoops that we have to jump through on those things, but most of the things that they require from the state of California, the secondary containment and financial responsibility, and all of those. I mean, we've been doing those for 30 or 40 years at this point here. So we do have to show. The tricky one is that we have to show that we've done an inspection once every 3 years. And even though we have the annual inspection requirement, they want to see it through our database. And as you can imagine, databases have a lot of fingers all over them. So we have to do that cleanup on an annual basis. But that's it. It's we just match up with what the requirements are for the Energy Policy Act of 2005. We do that certification annually as part of that funding.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So we have a question in from David Stone, and this is for the states that have critical junctures. So as part of the trigger, I suppose, for their programs, and it is, do the states that have critical junctures wish they had required continuous supervisory control? I think if I was paying attention, I think Joe talked about critical junctures.
Yes, I was one of the ones. And
Holly, I think.
yeah, there are times we wish we had a requirement for the certified installer to be on the site continuously through an install. But given the numbers we have, I mean, we don't have that many certified installers in New Mexico. So currently, we don't have enough certified installers, and I don't think we could get something like that passed with the way things are going right now.
This is Holly. I don't know if I necessarily wish that they had continuous supervisory control outside of the critical junctures. But we see a lot of the same thing as Joe, where you have one company with a handful of certified workers and they have multiple projects occurring at the same time. So you got certified workers that are running between projects and what's going on at the time. But we do try to make sure that they are present during the critical juncture activities, because those are important steps in the processes.
Great, thanks for that perspective.
I think that's just one of the trends I've been noticing, is that it's great to have like such a great range of states on here between like California and Louisiana and New Jersey, where there's like such a great range in what you all do. And I think each program is designed really well to suit sort of the environment of the state that you're in. So it's great to see sort of the different options, especially for states that maybe don't have a program and are trying to see how it could work for their state, possibly.
Great. So we have a question that's come in for Tom, California.
Oh, no.
Any update on tank warranty expiration required removals?
Yeah, there's not really so much of an update. So the tank warranty isn't something that we are concerned about. So we make these tests that have to be done every year and every 3 years, depending on the tank. So that 30-year line for us has never really been a thing. And, you know, one of the things that we just recently did, well, hopefully it's on the governor's desk to sign, is we extended, hopefully, our cleanup fund. And that's what we use for the financial responsibility for about 65% of the USTs in the state of California. I don't expect that will be extended again. At the end of that, we'll have, you know, double wall systems that are almost 50 years old at that point there. So when you have that state-run fund like that, it does take away a little bit of the moral hazard of making sure you stay on top of your particular tanks. But yeah, the warranty issue has never been an issue for the state of California. We are requiring, as I mentioned earlier, all single wall systems. Those need to be permanently closed in the next 27 months, I think, and some odd days. And so that we are hammering on. There's no room for any play on that. There's no mercy on that going to happen. So we are taking those tanks out. Those are coming out of the ground. And you know, very soon we'll have nothing but secondarily contained systems. It's one of the few areas that California is not the lead on. Usually California is always kind of at the forefront. There's probably 5 other states that have already closed out their single wall system. So that's not really unique to just California. That seems to be a trend for a lot of non-SPA states out there. Hope that answered your question.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Looking, I don't see new questions in the Q&A, so I will ask one to each of you, and knowing that, again, your answer is probably your own, perhaps, but I will suggest that you consider other programs. If you were to think about kind of what state certification program is the gold standard, what are your thoughts on that? Are they, you know, again, is it your own? Maybe you can provide another state a little bit of credit here, but I welcome that.
Yeah, I'll hop in right off the bat. So a few years ago, I was at an SWAMO presentation in DC, and I heard New Jersey talking about all of the things that they're doing. And one of the things that Jersey does that we can't do is that it's all in one office. They have control on everything. I love the direction that New Jersey is going. They've been one of my heroes for a very long time. They drop red tags like they're going out of style on people. So I am a big fan of the great state of New Jersey. And ours isn't bad either.
It's pretty impressive when California thinks you're tough.
Yeah, you guys scare me a little bit.
Joe or Holly, any thoughts on that?
I'm going to have to go with New Jersey myself. I mean, the fact that they have a calendar event where all of their work is posted and any inspector can hop on over a couple blocks at any time, any given point. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I wish I had the staff to do that. You know, that'd be a good way to
agree, Joe.
quality assurance on your testers.
Okay, all right. Well, we got 3 votes. That's pretty high praise.
Go Jersey.
I just want to put it out there, not to put New Jersey down, because they do an excellent job, but you have the advantage of being the most densely populated state. So your gas stations are definitely closer, but it's still really cool. And I think the calendar idea is great. But I have to be the obnoxious person that puts down New Jersey a little bit.
It's all good. I mean, we have some gas stations that take us quite a while to get to, but not many. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some.
Okay, it looks like we had one additional question come into the Q&A, and this is, so the context here is that Jeremy had asked this question early on with Joe's presentation of what is the ratio of inspectors to UST facilities. Joe had answered about 100 UST facilities per inspector, but we also regulate ASD systems, which means that inspectors average about 140 facilities assigned to them. So the question is, for those of you who are not Joe, what is the ratio of inspectors to UST facilities?
Yeah, in California, we have about 400, maybe a little less, inspectors statewide. I may be off on that number, maybe about 350, but that puts it about 40 or so. That's quick math. We have 14,000 plus facilities, and you guys can math it out. I don't have a calculator in front of me whatever that number is. So, but we do have a fairly decent ratio, less than 50 per UST inspector.
So for New Jersey, we do our inspections completely unannounced, and we open everything on our own. So all of the dispensers, all of the sump lids, everything gets opened up on our own. Because of that, we actually work in pairs. Every inspector is expected to take the lead on it at a minimum 120 stations a year. We do the tanks. We also do the air side of gas stations. So we're doing kind of double duty on our inspections. So 120 minimum each puts every inspector at least 240 a year. That does not include anything else. It doesn't include contractor inspections. It doesn't include incidents. It doesn't include, like Tom said, our delivery bans. Every quarter we run around and delivery ban everybody who has an expired registration. None of that counts towards their total inspections for the number. And then, like I said, we do handle our own enforcement as well. So it's not like we do an inspection and then hand it off. That being said, we have 10 full-time inspectors and 3 supervisors do half of an inspector's workload at the same time.
In Louisiana, we have 12 full-time DEQ inspectors. We do utilize a contractor that comes and does what I like to call milk runs. He does the site visits and documents in a report, and then the internal DEQ staff handles any kind of follow-ups or deficiency letters. DEQ inspectors, aside from the contractor, they do about 70 a year. We're on a 3-year cycle. And the contractor does about 700 every year. So on average, 1,200 to 1,300 a year in our state.
I just wanted to, I think Jenna made a really good point too, though, on like what the job of an inspector is really differently defined by state of what all they're taking care of. So it's really hard to look at like a ratio of tanks to inspectors. I know like when I was a UST inspector, I also like was doing some lust case management. So like, I think that's a really hard ratio to really figure out.
That's good context, LeJeune. Yeah, I mean, you can tell how different, what each of one of these responsibilities might look from state to state, just from our answers that we've gotten. So we've got another question that's come into the Q&A, and that is permitting installs a plus, or do most install programs find adequate control with on-site inspections?
Yeah, we look at permitting as a must, if not a plus. There's so many quirks to how our California systems are made, and compatibility and all these other things that are just part of the modern UST system. To not have that permitted and have a plan check associated with it would be foolish here in the state of California. So it's absolutely required. And then we do go out and take a look at when those systems are being put together as well too. So we have both. And again, because of the complexity of our systems, you have to have both here.
So we don't have a permitting process with the state. It's basically just the 14-day notice. Hey, we're going to install these tanks and these pipes, and this is who's doing it, and this is when we're going to start, and this is the address we're going to put them at. Sites do have to have township permits. We do not get involved with that. I guarantee you those townships aren't actually making sure they're in compliance. What it falls down to is our licensed contractors better know what they're doing and better install the system right, because if they don't and they install, say, a single wall tank tomorrow, when they go to register it after installation and it's complete, that registration will be denied and they will have to remove that tank. So there's kind of a catch on their end to make sure that it's done right. That may sound a little harsh, but we have made ourselves very open to ask us questions. Call us and ask us questions. You don't even have to tell us where you plan on doing it. Just, before we make you remove something that you shouldn't have put in the first place, kind of state. And it seems to be working with the staff just stopping in and saying hi and poking around. So far, it seems to be okay.
Yeah, no, that's a little disappointing.
Well, in New Mexico, yeah, we don't have a permit either, but one of the things we require on regulations, an owner, operator, and the contractor, certified installer, is supposed to submit a 30-day notification. Along with that 30-day notification, they're supposed to give us a list of all the equipment they're installing and a set of project drawings. We don't call them project plans because in our state, if they're plans, they're supposed to be stamped by an engineer, but we don't require that. So our staff can review those drawings to make sure, what they're installing is going to meet, our regulations. And, we do that review up in front and then, just talk to them, say, hey, why are you installing this? If you're installing, a flapper valve with a ball float, you don't need both. You're not supposed to be installing a ball float. Because a lot of times they just pull off the template plans off a manufacturer's website and then send it to you. Okay. And, we have inspectors who go out and, they're required to do, installs, modifications, repairs, compliance. And New Mexico is one of the states where, we have the, let's say, least dense population. So we can have inspectors who, if he wants to go out and do one inspection in the area, it could take him 3 or 4 hours to drive, to that rural community and do just one inspection. So.
In Louisiana, we don't really have a permitting process either. We have the notice of intent, and like New Mexico, our notice of intent requires that you list the type of equipment that you're going to be installing. We do require that you register your tank or pre-register per se before you can introduce fuel into your tank. And you'll get your certificate stating that you're registered in order to show your delivery drivers to receive fuel. And that's part of the install process. And then we also require a map to be submitted with the final registration showing piping, where it was installed, in accordance to the building, the tank, the roadways, and so forth. There is some submittals that are required to the fire marshal, but I'm not 100% sure on what all they're looking at. I think they're mostly looking at fire hazards and so forth. But that's where our requirements are for install.
Great, fantastic. So I think we have time just quickly to sneak in our last question, and then we'll finish up today. So this one is for you, Tom, and it is, you stated that California conducts inspections annually. Was there a transition period in which you went from inspecting every 3 years to annually? If so, how long did this transition take?
Jason, that's a great question, and I don't really have an answer for you. It's always been, as long, I've been in this program for 25 years now, and it's always been annually. But I'll find that out. I'll get back to you on that, Jason, specifically. But I would think here in California, just because of the staffing requirements that would have to be beefed up on that, 2 years would be a minimum time, just to make sure you have people in and trained and funding available and all those other things. So, and 2 years I think would be rather aggressive here in our state as well too.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Tom. And we are right up to the end of our period for our webinar. So what I want to do is thank our speakers again, Tom Henderson, Jenna Denuzzo, Joe Godwin, and Holly LeJeune. Fantastic presentations, fantastic discussion. Really appreciate your time today and the time you all put into prep for today. The value is here, and it's in sharing it with all of our attendees.